Hey, have you ever been in a conversation where the other person is nodding, but you can tell they're not really listening? Yeah, it's like talking to a mannequin. And no matter how good your English is, if your communication style is off, people will check out. I remember back when I was a young officer and I gave what I thought was a brilliant update to my captain. It was clear, technical, perfect. And he looked at me and said, "Dennis, you lost me in the first 30 seconds." Wow. That's when I learned that communication isn't about what you say, it's about what the other person hears. So today, we're going to break down some of the most common communication mistakes that professionals make in English and how to fix them so you sound clear, confident, and credible every time. And if you've had one of those moments where you realized halfway through a conversation that you lost your audience, drop it in the chat. I'd love to hear your story. You can ask questions there too, and I'll get a few after the Mastery Minute. And you're going to want to stick around for the Mastery Minute. I'm going to unpack an idiom that perfectly captures the idea of miscommunication. Let's jump right into it. So, I'm going to introduce Daniel. Daniel is a brilliant senior engineer, got a great mind. However, in team meetings, his updates were painful. He would talk for 5 minutes straight, full of jargon, side details, and by the end, half the room was checking their email or scrolling Instagram. So, what did we do? Well, we worked on 3 small changes: speaking in shorter chunks, checking for understanding, and cutting out unnecessary detail. 3 weeks later, his manager told me, "I finally understand what Daniel's talking about." Well, that's the kind of transformation that we're aiming for today. Let's jump into it. So, here's the challenge. Most professionals aren't failing because they don't know their subject. They're failing because their message gets lost in how they deliver it. So today, let's break down 5 of the most common mistakes with real life examples and fixes that you can use. Yeah, starting today. So, mistake number 1, talking too much. Picture this. You're in a Monday meeting, morning meeting, the worst kind, right? And the manager says, "Let's get a quick update on the product launch." And you launch into every detail: the brainstorming sessions, the design tweaks, the 3-hour meeting with marketing, even the coffee spill in the break room. 10 minutes later, you finally reveal, "So we're ready for launch in the next week." By then, most of the team has finally checked out. So, how do we fix this problem? The simple solution is lead with the key point. The product is ready for launch next week. Then pause. Let that sink in. Ask, how many questions do you have about how we got here? Offer supporting details only if people want them, and then deliver them in short, clear segments. Why is this a big deal? Why does it work like that? The pause, we talked about this last week, the pause acts like a breath in the conversation. It gives your listeners time to process, respond, and then re-engage. And it helps you to sound more confident and concise and considerate because you're respecting people's time rather than overwhelming them with information that they may or may not need. So there's your mistake number one and how to fix it. Number two, too much jargon. Oh, this really gets me. It's one of my pet peeves, one of the things that bothers me. So imagine, say, you're a finance manager or something, and you're addressing a mixed team of marketers, designers, and engineers. You say, we'll mitigate volatility through diversified asset allocation. You see a few nods, but most people are looking around or looking down at the paper or frowning. Why? Well, they've tuned you out because they don't understand the terms. And this is what happens when we assume everyone shares our technical vocabulary. This could be for programmers, it could be for designers. I've had many conversations like that. So that's the problem, using too much jargon. Now, how do we fix it? Well, the fix is easy. You find a way to swap the jargon for everyday language. So in this case, we'll spread our investments so one risky area doesn't hurt the whole plan. See how much simpler that is? No more allocations and blah, blah, blah. If you must use technical terms, sometimes we do, be sure to follow them with a quick explanation in plain English. For example, if you say, that's what we call diversified asset allocation, well, that just means that we're spreading out our investments. See how I explained it? Diversified asset allocation. Why does this work? Well, it's because plain language reaches every person in the room. It builds clarity and keeps your audience engaged. And it shows respect for people's varied backgrounds and makes it easier for them to contribute to the conversation. Not everybody has the same background, so be looking out for them as well. Okay, the next mistake that people make is not checking for understanding. Imagine that you're rolling out maybe a new workflow in a Monday meeting. You go through the slides, explain each step, and move on to the next topic. A week later, you discover 3 different teams are following 3 different versions of the process because each group understood your explanation a little bit differently. And now the project is off track. Not because the plan was bad, but because the message wasn't confirmed. So, we fix this by asking questions. After you explain, use that pause again and check in. Ask, how do you see this working for your team? Or, does that make sense so far? Or, is there any way I can make this clearer? You can also invite someone to summarize the plan back to you in their own words. This will quickly reveal any gaps or misunderstanding. Just say, Susan, can you give me your understanding of what we've gone through so far? So, excuse me. Why does this work? This little extra step ensures that everyone is aligned before they leave the room. You can use this in meetings, in one-on-one situations, even in an interview. Maybe you might have an interview. This invites feedback. It shows that you are really interested in clarity and helps you to catch problems before they grow into costly mistakes. Okay. Mistake number 4. Here's one. This one's on you. Another one. You're failing to listen actively. So picture this. You're in a meeting and your colleague is explaining a supply chain delay. And instead of focusing on their words, Your mind races ahead, planning your reply. What happens? You only catch half of what they're saying. And when you respond, they have to repeat themselves. This is what happens when we listen to reply instead of listening to understand. This also happens for a lot of people who are not native speakers, and they hear a word and they think, oh, what's that word? What's that word? Instead of listening to understand everything, they're trying to translate a single word in their head, and they'll miss the rest of the conversation. And then they have to say, oh, can you help me? Can you repeat that? So, how do we fix it? Slow down. Slow down and fully absorb their message before you speak. Paraphrase their point back to them. Oh, so you're saying the shipment delay is due to customs paperwork, right? This shows them that you've heard them, and it gives them a chance to confirm or clarify that you understand. So active listening actually prevents misunderstandings. It strengthens the relationship between people, coworkers, family members, friends, you name it, and it builds trust. It makes the other person feel respected and valued, which leads to better collaboration, better teamwork. And our fifth mistake is overloading with detail. That was one of Daniel's problems, right? So picture this. You're meeting with stakeholders to announce a change. Instead of getting to the point, you start at the very beginning, the project's origins, 15 years ago, every milestone, every challenge. And by the time you finally say, we need to change the scope of the project, people have mentally checked out, and that key message is lost in all the noise. So, the way we fix this is really simple. You lead with the main point right away. We need to change the scope of the project. Then pause and invite questions. Would you like the background on why? This way, you provide detail only to those who want it. Because, let's face it, these big things, they don't need all the detail in the world. So, now, why does this work? Leading with the headline grabs the attention, sets the context immediately, and respects everyone's time. Nobody likes a long meeting. Optional details keep focus on what matters the most, while still making information available for those who need it or want it, right? They can ask the question, invite that. So I want you to remember, good communication is a two-way street. It's about creating a shared understanding, building trust, and making your listener feel engaged from the start to the end. It's not just delivering words and hoping that they land. The best communications connect, clarify, and confirm every step of the way. And you can do this in any language, no matter how good or bad your English is. Nobody's English is that bad. All right. So your challenge for this week is pick one of these mistakes and work on the fix. Notice how people respond when your communication is sharper and more engaging. And if you want to improve your English without boring grammar drills, check out my course, Mastering English for Busy Professionals. Just 10 minutes a day to train your brain to think and speak naturally in English. The link is in the description. And remember, if you've got a question about today's topic, now's the time to drop it in the chat. And I'll answer a few more right after the Mastery Minute, which is right now. It's time for the Mastery Minute. And today's idiom is to get your wires crossed. Have you ever scheduled lunch with a friend only to realize that you showed up on different days? Or you sent an email thinking you'd answered their question, but they were actually asking about something else entirely? That is an example of getting your wires crossed. A friendly way to describe a misunderstanding when two people think they're talking about the same thing, but they're not. Where does this come from? It actually comes from the early days of telephone systems, back before we had all this Wi-Fi and cell phones and 5G and all that. Back then, calls were connected with physical wires, and sometimes they had operators, ladies and stuff, that would put the wires into the right cables, into the right holes. And sometimes calls were not connected properly. The wires got crossed. And as a result, you might pick up your phone expecting to talk to Aunt Martha and instead find yourself in the middle of a stranger's conversation. Ugh. So over time, that image of wires crossing became a metaphor for human miscommunication. So you might say, we must have gotten our wires crossed. I thought the meeting was tomorrow, not yesterday, or not today, excuse me. So yeah, use this when you want to explain a mix-up in a friendly, non-blaming way. It's perfect for business and everyday English. So that is it for episode 49. Today you've learned 5 common communication mistakes and how to fix them, plus an idiom that can help you talk about misunderstandings naturally. Next time, you're going to want to see this because we're going to talk about some practical English speaking hacks. Simple, high impact techniques you can use to sound more fluent, confident, and natural in any situation. From quick mental prep tricks to conversation openers that work every time. You'll learn how to make your English sharper and more effective right away in just 15 minutes. Can you believe it? Or 17 in this case. If you found this helpful, I would really appreciate it. Give us a like, hit that subscribe button, and share it with a friend who wants to master English, one habit at a time. Let me see if we have any questions, and looks like we don't. So, with that, I'll see you on Wednesday.